when I think about it, it's like, yeah, the Bay Area, it was a tight little unit, you know? Us playing gigs with Exodus, who, you know, Kirk was eventually gonna end up in Metallica, you know, and us playing gigs with Suicidal Tendency, with Rob in it, us playing gigs, you know, and having Cliff in the audience, you know, coming to check us out. And I know there's a famous picture somewhere of us jamming, and Cliff is in the crowd headbanging, you know, at the Stone. And man, it was just Stay Seen. It was a melting pot of everyone that enjoyed the same kind of music and loved it. So everyone was hanging out all the time. Everyone knew each other, and everyone was friendly. There was no, I mean, there was a healthy competition between the bands, but I tell you, everyone went there to support them, and you know, everyone was fighting for the bigger picture, which was, you know, heavy metal taking over the world, of course.
You know, when you're playing a show and you look over and you see you're a 15-year-old kid and you see Cliff Burton headbanging to your band, it's you know, that feeling right there is indescribable. And the fact that I can even say that is mind-blowing. The fact that there's photos of Cliff wearing a Death Angel shirt, you know, that's the best thing ever.
Because with Kill 'Em All, it raised the awareness that something was happening in the Bay Area, something that was unique, that was only happening in the Bay Area, you know? It wasn't happening in LA. There were kind of like little sparks of it. You know, there were little sparks of it in New York, but it was the whole gestation period and crystallization of it all happened in the Bay Area. The full realization happened when Kill 'Em All came out. And then from then on, I felt like any of us, all of us could do this, you know, and all of us should do this and go in there and, like, you know, form bands and record albums and you know, really, like, hold up the scene, support the scene, and really make it what it was.
The last show we ever played with Metallica, this shows you how long ago it's been, was when they came home and we played New Year's Eve at the Bill Graham Civic after they recorded Master of Puppets. But we also blew them off the stage that night. James said after the show, he goes, "You guys are really good. That's the last time you'll ever play with us." And it was. Sorry, James. I remember you said it. We had more amps, a bigger drum riser. It looked like our show, but you know, they were awesome, you know. But
this kind of music, it's street. It's very real, and it's in its lifetime, I think it's become a lifestyle, way more than it was when we were kids. I mean, yeah, we wore denim vests and put patches on them and whatever the hell, but you know, now it's become, you know, a thing of many different generations. Like I see older siblings with younger siblings, parents with their children. And it's not weird or alienating like when we were kids, when I was a kid, and I liked rock and my dad liked country and Western. You know, Slayer, heavy metal, Sabbath, wherever you want to say, it's more of a brotherhood and a lifestyle.
Cliff would always, you know, be very complimentary to us, which was something we, you know, it was mind-blowing. You know, at first we kind of just thought they're being nice because we're young. But Cliff would, like, really get in depth about how much he enjoyed our music and the melodies and, you know, the different time signatures. Like, he would really, you know, it was very mind-blowing to us that Cliff was very supportive of us. And, yeah, he would, you know, as I said, he'd wear the shirts. He'd come to the shows. I do remember one incident. They just got back from Europe. I was at Ruthie's Inn. I don't remember who was playing this particular night, but as I said, you know, everyone went to everyone's shows. And I walked in, I was wearing a Venom Welcome to Hell shirt, you know, and of course, right, I bought it, cut the sleeves off because that's what everyone did, you know. I walked in, and Cliff, you know, and I see Cliff, you know, I'm like, "Hey, Cliff," and he looks at me and goes, "What are you doing wearing that shirt?" And, you know, and they just done a bunch of shows with, you know, Venom in Europe. And he gets both his fingers like this, and he starts poking me in the sternum on my shirt. "You guys are so much better than those guys." And I'm like, this, whoa, you know, wow, you know, and Cliff's poking me in the chest. I'm like, okay. Why am I wearing this dumb shirt?
Well, my earliest memories as a kid were listening to my father play flamenco guitar. that's kind of when I started to really embrace, I think, and channel music and stringed instruments in particular. And the fingering, you know, him being a finger player and not necessarily playing with a pick so much, I think that's kind of why I gravitated towards bass. Some of that had to do with it, just the technique of being a finger player. And then I was fortunate to have parents that were young enough to embrace and absorb all the hip happening music at the time, ranging from Motown to the Rolling Stones to Led Zeppelin, you know, and then funk bands like the Ohio Players, you know. So Stevie Wonder as well. So we had a wide variety of styles in our household, and that was just my parents. When you got to the cousins, then you got into ZZ Top, and then you got into Black Sabbath, and you got into Parliament Funkadelic, and you got into punk, and the gamut opened pretty wide.
Well, it's interesting with thrash because that was actually a term that someone in the press dubbed us. First, I thought they were saying trash, which I took kind of personal. But, thrashing also plays to, metal, punk, and skaters. You know, we weren't surfers, we were skaters. You know, it was kind of more of a land animal, I think. You know, and that was, the skate community was a big part of that. And even then, things like Suicidal Tendencies, who came up in, and again, part of this punk culture that was part of the metal culture that is part of the thrash culture. And, the 90s were brutal for thrash metal. It was really, really tough. We had a couple of big records. With Rust in Peace, and then, of course, Countdown to Extinction. But then after that, it became tough, and it really reinvented with all this kind of new metal and all this kind of radio metal and all that. And it wasn't until into the 2000s when you saw bands like Lamb of God, who grew up on Megadeth and Metallica records. They really helped bring the scene back for the next generation. And I think kind of human nature is like, well, where did this all come from? So then people, it sort of revived a lot of things. I think probably, certainly in Megadeth, Anthrax, Testament, Exodus, some of the deeper, cut bands that were part of our scene back in 1982, 83, 84. And it's funny how cyclical things are. I always say there's like these 20-year cycles. And so once things came back, and it's ironic that in 2010, we did the 20th anniversary of Rust in Peace, which then, right at that exact time, Metallica had put the call out to do the Big Four, which that one move right there, I think, was probably the big exclamation part for our whole scene that we created all those years before.